Well, hello, all you wonderful people. If this is your first time here, welcome. If it's not, welcome back. Taylor here, and today we're going to be going over Starlink and how it's treated me for the past year. So more than likely, if you stumbled upon this video, you're like myself, you live in a rural community that has limited access to internet. And if that's the case, you've probably been hunting and searching for any sort of reliable internet service. Like myself. In the area I live in, it's extremely rural, except for 15 minutes any direction, you're in a major populated area. With that being said, I do have an opportunity to get actual cable internet. We have a CenturyLink provider here. You might be asking, well, why did I get Starlink? Well, the reason for that is the CenturyLink provider that supplies access for my town only supplies 10 megabytes down and a quarter of a megabyte up. And that is horrendous. There's no getting around it. It's absolutely awful. Granted, yes, there are some of you out there who probably don't even have that. But that's what started my whole journey into getting Starlink. So let's dive into what Starlink is real quick. So essentially you go to Starlink's website and you can place an order for their dishy, as they call it, and their user terminal, which is a router modem essentially. So you get placed on a waiting list or not, depending on where you live. Such as me, for example, I live in Central Florida, and up until about Disney, if you're familiar with Florida at all, everything south of Disney is essentially open. It's available now. They're in open cells, and we'll get into that here in a second. Where I particularly live, and everything north of Disney, it's very sporadic where there are open, availability. So you get put into a best effort, and you get put on essentially a waiting list. So me personally, I think I had to wait 5 or 6 months when I ordered my unit. And of course, now the units have gone up in price, but I had to wait about 5 or 6 months. You have to pay the initial cost for the dishy and user terminal, which I think totals now $5.99 with a $100 deposit. And then of course you pay for monthly installments for keeping your internet going. With that being said, my unit came in. Installation was extremely easy. I did have to mount mine on the roof. That took a little bit to get mounted. Just because I had to wait for an additional mount to come in, and I ordered the flashing mount, I believe is the correct one, or it's just the roof mount. Regardless, I'll put the one that I ordered here. But I ordered that, installed it, ran a line. It's not very pretty. I always meant to go back and clean it up a little bit, never did, but ran the 75-foot cable that came with it through under my soffit, into my attic, down into my little utility closet in my office, where I have aspirations of having a home server, home lab kind of setup in there. Currently, as you can see, it's not anywhere near there, but we're getting there. From there, you download the app. You connect to your user terminal. It goes into its whole routing thing. It's going to want you to find what the best location is to place it. It's going to check. It gives you a little camera. You can, scan around the air and make sure that there's no obstructions, and it'll tell you, oh, this is the best spot. You install it in that area, and boom, Bob's your uncle, and you have internet. Starlink is satellite, but it's low Earth orbit satellite. So unlike normal satellites, like your HughesNet or satellite TV and those kind of things, to send satellites up to this low Earth orbit thing, and actually as of today of me filming this video, there was just another Starlink launch, SpaceX launch, that launched an additional whatever number of satellites up into the sky to then add to the array that's already there. Of course, the satellites do take a little while to go into operation. So from there, once they're in operation, there's ground stations located across North America, and I'm sure the rest of the world, that essentially send a uplink and a downlink to these satellites that then trace among the array, and they connect to you, the user, your home terminal. And that is, in a nutshell, really basic, simple, because I don't know all the exact details. That is how your internet works. This is especially crucial for those who live in, like I said, rural communities where even cell service is hard to come by, or your cell service is so slow you're only getting 5 megabytes down that you're looking for any solution to fix that. Well, there's Starlink. So before we even get started, if you want to skip everything else, I'm going to let you know Starlink, if it's your only option, and if your other options are slow, such as a 10 megabyte down, absolutely 100% it's worth it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You can game with it, you can stream with it, you can live a normal life. You don't care about anything else. It's 100% worth it. And if you're gonna close out now, I would love it if you guys would leave a like and subscribe to the channel so I can continue making this stuff and I know what you guys like. Now let's move into the nitty gritty. I've got the pros, I've got the cons. Over the past year, like I said, I've been using Starlink and it's been 100% fantastic. It is affected by the weather. There's plenty of articles and stuff out there that's because of low Earth orbit, everything like that. Regardless, it is affected by the weather. I've never had Starlink completely go out, except for when the entire server system, whatever it was, completely took a shit last year, I believe. But outside that, I've not had any issues with it. With at least outages, that is. Sure, there's those times where you might drop for a little bit, like if you're playing a game or something like that. I have been disconnected, a couple times, but nothing that's unbearable, and you can completely keep gaming. So to give you an idea of my usage, now I believe they only started this back in March because I had no records before that, but I've had Starlink since last year, and that was my only internet option. At least back to July or even May, I've been using a crap ton of internet, as you can see. Every single month or a month time span in between billing cycles, I'm using 1.5 terabytes, if not more. So I've been putting this thing to its tests. Along with that, I've also been doing tons of speed tests because I'm a nerd, and I like to continue checking because it kind of just refreshes me in my head, and it's like, yeah, you're getting your money's worth. Speaking of money, prices have increased, but we'll get there. Anyways, looking at my data usage, I've used a crap ton of data. That's between downloading, uploading, whether it's pictures, videos for YouTube, streaming even, or playing a ton of games and downloading games. That's just a mixture of data, plus my kid watching all the movies that he loves to watch over and over and over again on like Disney Plus. He uses a ton of data, and that might even sound foreign to you, using streaming services such as Disney Plus, Netflix, all of those things. You absolutely can, 100%. As long as you have open visibility in the air and you have no obstructions, which again, you can use the Starlink app to make sure that's the case, you're gonna get great speeds. Moving into speeds, I've been testing at least for the past day, just so I have quantifiable data, because I can sit here and tell you I've been using it for the past year, and I would say my average speed probably is like 80 megabytes down with roughly 10 to 15 megabytes up, if not even more. You might not believe me, but looking at actual speed tests, I can break down actual averages. So for y'all, for the past day, I've been running a speed test every 30 minutes for 12 hours. So I did 24 speed tests. Now, of course, anyone can say, well, that doesn't show me what's over the entire, course of a year of usage. And here's some speed tests that I've been running just to show you that, yes, this is kind of the speeds that I've been getting. Some go down, some go up. As more satellites, get put into operation, speeds continue to increase. But we can dive back into, at least for today, what my speeds have been. So an average speed for the past 12 hours, 24 tests, the average speed was 71.2 megabytes down and 9.3 megabytes up. Pretty good, especially if you have nothing. If you have nothing, still good. If you have CenturyLink with 10 megabytes down and 1/4 of a megabyte up, still fantastic. Now we get into one thing that really depends on where you live in North America. So you have what's called peak hours, and Starlink, if you look at all of their documentation, doesn't really specify what peak hours are. There is a spot that says when they were going to put into place, data usage caps where you had to pay for extra data. They never did. But when they were announcing that, they were saying, well, if you used over 1 terabyte in a month's time, or a billing cycle's time, 30 days or 31 days, whatever it comes out to be, if you use between the hours of, I think it was 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., if you use over 1 terabyte, they're gonna throttle you or charge you extra, whatever the verbiage was. I don't know if that's their peak hours, because outside of that, I've heard 5 to 10 and 6 to 10 or 6 to 11. There's nothing actually concrete, and I would say that's probably more accurate. Your peak hours are probably more 5 to 10 or 6 to 11. What that means is, depending on where you live in the world, if you're not in an open cell, when you sign up for Starlink, you get put on what's called best effort. It might show on your account residential, but you're really only best effort, meaning that during those peak times you get throttled. And in a couple speed tests, you can kind of see it, because outside of those times, you get pretty decent speeds. I've seen upwards of 200 megabytes, so it's not uncommon. But during peak hours, you'll hit 30 and kind of hit a wall or hit a ceiling in a sense, and you'll see it kind of flatline on your speed test. Watching other people, do their reviews and, researching Starlink for myself, that seems to be the case, and that seems to be what most people have suggested is happening. I wanted to break down my average speeds for the past day a little bit further. So 71.2 and 9.3 up, those are average speeds, universal across the board. If we take the average outside of peak, just for that 12 hours, the average download speed was 93.5 megabytes down. The upload speed average was 9.6. Sounds pretty good. Even that, we're only 20 megabytes higher, but a lot of people, they hear the whole peak hours and you get throttled. Well, then now let's look at our average for peak, which I use between 5 and 10 p.m. If we're looking at just the average peak speeds, I've got 58.5 megabytes down and 6.6 megabytes up. Still, if you have no other options, fantastic. If you have low DSL speeds or satellite or whatever you've been using this whole time, or a 5G hotspot, and you just don't get good connection, again, even your peak speeds are still decent enough to live a normal life and have the amenities of 2023. Now, I do want to say, with all these speeds, if you go and watch this video, I did switch from Starlink to T-Mobile, and that's only because of availability in my area, upcoming, fiber installations, and cost. If T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T, like their home internet services, aren't available for you, then it's not really an option. But if you care to know about that, and possibly it is an option for you, I'll put a card or a link somewhere up here and you can go watch that and see why I changed. With that being said, the reason why that's important is because the only thing that's currently on my Starlink network while I was doing these tests was my phone. I set a timer, every 30 minutes I was doing a speed test on my phone. So yes, the speeds are gonna be a little lower because it's not even hooked up to my mesh network. It's literally just from the Starlink router itself. I was doing speed tests on my phone. So yes, Wi-Fi connections, you are gonna be, decreasing your speed automatically as compared to an Ethernet service. But at the same time, there was no other devices on my network, not my Starlink network, that is. Because if you don't know, ground station, talking to the satellite and going to your user terminal, your router, your whole system like that, you're getting X amount of bandwidth. It could be 100 megabytes down of bandwidth. Well, all the devices you add onto your network are sharing that same bandwidth. So you only have 100 megabytes cap, and of course fluctuates, just follow me with easy numbers. But you can only divide 100 so many times, especially when you're using like a phone and you're watching a video, or you're using 4K TVs that are using more bandwidth to watch videos. Say you have 4 TVs running at the same time with 4K, the average recommended speed for 4K, I believe, is 20 megabytes down. If you're running 4 of them, you're running 80 megabytes to watch some videos. So you're spreading that bandwidth apart. So take that with a grain of salt. That's pretty much speeds you're getting right there. Now, besides just these speeds I've been using for the past 12 hours, I have used Starlink for my entire home network, meaning it goes from my router, you can put it in a bypass mode, which turns off the Wi-Fi essentially, and I run it into my mesh network. I have a 4-node mesh network in my house. I think it's just better speeds. It's Wi-Fi 6. It's what I've already had prior to having Starlink, so I just continued on with that. It makes, home lab setup and smart home setup just a little easier, and it's just what I like. Even using it with that system, these are still average speeds. In fact, I'll put up a couple of speed tests I've done over the year where I'm still getting 200 megabytes down on a system that's running 53 devices, which is what I have active right now. That's an undisclosed amount of, security cameras, alarm system, my computer, my game console, my laptop, my TVs, phones, my kid's iPad, etc. There's 53 active devices on my network, and I still get decent speeds. And when I say decent, I mean good. Good when you're comparing it to having nothing. Of course, Starlink does not take the place of fiber or coax lines such as Xfinity, Spectrum, those kind of systems. It's just not going to take the place of that. Now, with those speed tests, of course, like I said, I like to game, I like to stream. Here's a PS5 speed test that I just recently took utilizing Starlink, and still plenty easy to run any games you want and download games as well. There has been some complaints of people getting double natted. What a double nat means is how Starlink and cellular providers work. They generally pool a public IP, meaning like Spectrum or Xfinity or these other actual, broadband cable providers or fiber providers, they provide your modem that they issue you or you purchase, whatever the case is, with a public IP address. And then of course your modem to router then, subdivides that IP into a normal 192.168.1.1 or whatever setup you have. And that's just so your router can then communicate with devices within the network. But when you're communicating with a ground station in a sense, and you're communicating back with Xfinity or Spectrum, you're using a public IP, meaning port forwarding works both ways. With Starlink, and I don't know all the exact technical, details of it, but I know with Starlink, I think port forwarding only works going out, not request, because you are sharing a public IP, but you can still send a request out. It's just getting that public request or that request from a server to come back directly to you when you do not have an IP assigned directly to you can result in a double NAT. So for instance, Xboxes, they seem to have the biggest issue with Starlinks. Personally, my PS5, my PS4 before that, and my computer and stuff, I've not personally ran into an issue. That speed test I showed you with my PS5 shows a NAT type of 2, which is not strict. That's just kind of there's a couple issues with it. Again, don't know the technical details with it, but I've not had any real issues. They are working on fixing that. So there's limitations on like IP4V, I think is what it's called. That's the current standard. And it's like a 32-bit system or something along those lines. Really, I don't want to make myself sound smart because I don't know exactly all those details, but I know they are switching to an IP6V, I believe is what it is. And from there, they're supposed to be able to give systems like this a private IP, like an IP directly for you. So that is one thing just to kind of be concerned about, I guess. Again, I have not personally had any issues with it. I also don't have an Xbox, but from looking at forums and stuff, that is an issue that people run into. We can even look at my Starlink app itself. We can go through outages that maybe looks bad, but really they're just minor blips, and it's not like your whole system goes out. But the Starlink app provides, nice details on like these outages, and usually it's a network issue, which could just be latency or satellites coming in and out of view, which happens all the time if you just look at any grid or Starlink map. Like, of course, they're going to go in and out, but you're always essentially connected to one. Again, I've never completely lost my internet service. It just will slow down, essentially. Utilizing the Starlink app also provides you with a way to test your speed directly to your router. Again, from there, depending on your home setup, depending on what you're using to do the speed test, your speeds could vary, but at least you can check the speeds going directly to your router. Now, I do want to note, if you use this and you use their advanced speed test within their app, it's going to show you some crazy astronomical numbers going to your phone. That is the theoretical speeds that your phone is getting. That is not, it's kind of impossible. I think the speed test I did was like 70 megabytes down to the router, and then it's showing 500 to my phone. Well, if you only have 700, there's no way for it to send 500. So just keep in mind that's like a theoretical maximum. That's just the Wi-Fi connection. So just note that. Use like speedtest.net or something like that to actually send a server request and then get a response and get a more accurate speed. Now, if you're watching this because you have been thinking about getting Starlink and you're just waiting for someone to do an update or something like that, or you bite the bullet, here we go kind of thing. Remember, there's a ton of different ways you can order it. You can order either a residential service or roam. I think those are generally the two most common options. And you can hop right on their website to order it. And you can also hop on the website and check and see if your location is available. Now we can move to the cons, and I don't have many. Like I said, probably like many of you, when I was first getting Starlink, when I was first signing up for Starlink, while I did have another option, the option was not good. So I wanted something faster, especially coming from my old house where I had a gigabyte down and 35 megabytes up, actual fiber internet. Moving out to an area where I wanted some peace, I didn't live on top of my neighbors, I was limited. So I went from having this high-speed internet where I utilized, devices and I like technology, to having nothing. I needed something faster. And CenturyLink was constantly going out. The lines are old. Any storm or something would take out like the internet for like 3 days at a time. And it's just not, especially if you work from home, it's not reasonable at all. So I switched to Starlink. So I don't have many cons. As I've said over this, there's only one time that I completely lost service, and that was when the entire server went down for, I don't even remember what the reason is. It was like a year ago and the entire system went down. Outside of that, I've never personally lost connection. There has been times where the system just reboots, and of course that's not that really, you should do that. You should set it automatically to reboot, but it might like adjust itself or something like that, and it's generally middle of the night or like an update gets pushed through. Outside of that, while I'm actually using it, I've never had an issue, other than speeds slowing down, which, like I said, looking at some peak time speeds, it does limit itself, but I wouldn't really say that's a con. That's just, it's kind of just for par of the system that you're utilizing. It's not going to be 100% perfect because it's satellite. Like I said, weather does affect it, whether people want to admit it or not. Weather does slow it down. But again, it was still faster than what I was getting on my CenturyLink service. Really, the only con that I have for Starlink is that prices keep increasing. I remember when I first pre-ordered my system, during that 5-month waiting period, they increased the prices. My price still got increased as well. It only went up $50 where they increased overall. I think it went up $100, but it is getting more and more expensive. They haven't done a big price increase since then, but they have with the internet. So for a while I was paying $110, and I think that's what it was, and then they upped it to $120. Now, keep in mind, that is for your best effort speed. So if you don't live in an available cell, you're gonna pay $120. If you do, if you look up your address on Starlink's website and they say, hey, you're available right now, you're only gonna pay $90. And you shouldn't be throttled during peak hours, because it does prioritize residential users. That's, again, even though your router might be getting only so much bandwidth, they only have so much theoretical bandwidth they can send out to everybody. So they do prioritize people on their actual residential and not best effort. So again, available cells. Keep that in mind when you're going to order. Again, though, a lot of this is moot if you have no other options, or your other options are absolutely horrible and you just want to enjoy life a little bit. I understand. With me, and again, that video I shared, if you want to click on it, why I switched from, in my case, Starlink to T-Mobile, was literally only for one reason. That reason alone was price. Just that the $120 monthly upkeep compared to T-Mobile home internet that finally became an actual viable option for me, going from $120 to $25 was night and day. So it's just saving me and my family a lot of money over the course of a year with something else that's viable. Again, if T-Mobile wasn't an option for me, because Verizon and AT&T are not an option for me, I wouldn't be switching. I would still be using Starlink. So I don't want to keep this video super long. I just wanted to, get it out there what my year update was. And again, I'm not getting rid of it because of issues with Starlink itself. It's just I have another viable option. Just like if fiber or cable solutions in your area became viable or an actual thing, and all of a sudden they came tomorrow and said, hey, fiber for, I think $70 is what Xfinity costs for like a gigabyte down, you'd be stupid not to switch. I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. But again, if you're a rural community like myself and you don't have those options, or your options are internet back from the 80s and the lines that were installed in the 80s, go for it. Absolutely 100% do it. But I'm gonna stop rambling on. I think the video is probably already long enough. Guys, in the comments below, let me know if you have Starlink. What's your usage been like? If you're on a residential actual service, like you're actually in an available cell, I want to know what kind of speeds you're getting, because I don't know anybody who has Starlink. I'm kind of the only one in my friend circle, my wife's friend circle, anything like that has it. Even everybody in my community, I think I'm the only one who has Starlink. There's only one other individual I can think of Starlink, and I don't know him personally, so it's not going to go out of my way to ask him, but I'm the only one. So let me know what your usages are, or let me know if there's another alternative besides HughesNet. I would never pay for HughesNet. If you've watched the whole video and got to this point, and you're like, maybe if HughesNet was an option, don't do it. Anyways, as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Hit the like button. It helps out, with other people seeing this and hopefully getting an update. And if they've been waiting to bite the bullet and order Starlink, maybe this will allow them to do it, and we continue moving on, this global broadband, provider that is Starlink, regardless of personal opinion, because I've already had some people be like, well, don't support him. Well, internet is fantastic. So unfortunately, regardless of personal opinion, I like internet and I like fast internet. So we're going to keep going with it. So hit that subscribe button if you guys want to see more. As always, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.